Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for taking time to be here today. We have an exciting program for you, but before we get started, I would like to highlight a few things so you know how to participate in today's event. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application engagement tools you can use. All the engagement tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. If you need technical support during today's event, click the question mark icon in the navigation menu at the bottom of your screen to find answers to frequently asked questions, or you can type your questions in the Q&A widget to the right of the media player. You can use the same box to submit your questions to the speakers at any time. If we don't get to all your questions today, we will follow up with you offline. Engage with today's content and let us know how you're feeling with the emoji reactions. If you miss anything, don't worry, you will receive an email within 24 hours with a link to the on-demand recording when it becomes available. So now let's get started with today's program, Healthcare's Data Readiness Crisis and How to Overcome It, sponsored by Innovators. And then with that, I'd like to turn things over to our moderator, Dr. Jane.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our panel today, centered around healthcare's data readiness crisis and how to overcome it. My name is Dr. Anil Jain. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Innovators and your moderator for today's session. I am joined by a panel of subject matter experts and leaders from Upstream, Morning Consult, and Innovators. Now, Upstream is one of the fastest growing primary healthcare solution providers in the US who work in partnership with healthcare practices and clinics, offering a comprehensive, risk-free solution for physicians that finances, delivers, and sustains better outcomes for everyone. Morning Consult is a global decision intelligence company changing how modern leaders make smarter, faster, and better decisions. The company pairs its proprietary high-frequency data with applied AI to better inform decisions on what people think and how they will act. Innovators is a health cloud company committed to accelerating innovation by unifying patient data across systems and settings to empower healthcare organizations to rapidly develop scalable, modern applications that improve clinical, operational, and financial outcomes. With that, I'll turn it over to our panelists so they can all give you a brief intro of who they are. Let's go ahead and start with Lucas.
Hello, my name is Lucas Som, Chief Information Officer with Upstream. I've been in the technology industry for around 25 years now. Most of that time was spent in technology consulting, building a number of different custom applications and platforms for companies across industries of various sizes. I've been with Upstream for over a year now and really focus on kind of defining our vision, strategy, and technology vision for the organization.
Great. Mike?
Hey, everybody, Mike Sutton. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Innovators and a self-proclaimed career data nerd. I've been doing data from the early days back during the database war days when I was with Sybase. And then most recently, before joining Innovators 3 years ago, I was the Chief Technology Officer at Kaiser Permanente, helping them move to the cloud and manage their data. I also spent time at the Central Intelligence Agency, which you might imagine has a fairly complex security and data issue and help them solve their problem of information sharing. It's great to be here.
Great, thanks, Mike. Liam?
Hi, Liam Hickey, Managing Director of Client Services at Morning Consult. Like Mike, I'm a self-professed data nerd. I've been in insights consulting for the last 18 years now and spent a lot of time in technology research in Seattle, now Chicago, and Australia and New Zealand.
Wonderful. Well, I think I'll just join the bandwagon and declare myself a data nerd as well for the purposes of today's conversation. Well, let's move on to the agenda. Now, what we're going to focus on today is really thinking about the challenges and obstacles that impede our digital transformation efforts. And I think we've got the right team to talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about where the majority of healthcare executives plan to make their technology investments, and then move over to how enterprise data strategies can extend beyond the transaction record systems that we're all familiar with. And then finally, how we start to think about the tactical and the strategic differences between thinking about interoperability and data readiness and how to get there very, very quickly, at least as quickly as we can. Now, we are so excited to dig in and have a thoughtful conversation today, particularly noting our panelists' diverse backgrounds and expertise. And I hope they will layer in not only where they currently are thinking about things, but in their past experiences where the industry has taken them. Now, to our audience members, we are so grateful that you've been able to make time out of your busy days to join us. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to have Liam present first. If you move on to the next slide. Liam?
Great, thank you. So before I show you some of the results of the research, I'll tell you what we did, who we spoke to, and how we did it. So the results we'll take you through today are from 75 US-based healthcare executives. They're all very high caliber executive decision makers within their organization. They were hand recruited individually for this research and paid commensurately for their time. So each and every one of them is a valid data point on their own. Collectively, the 75 represent a wonderful, rich cross-section of healthcare leaders' views and challenges and priorities in 2022. Next slide. And what we're dealing with here is a problem. It's something that you'll all recognize immediately, whether you're thinking about it from your organization's perspective or just as a patient, as a health consumer on the other side of the relationship. So just this past week, my youngest became eligible for a COVID vaccine. So of course, as soon as we could, we signed up online. We made an appointment. As part of that process, we had to fill in all the details, all the information. So name, contact details, primary care physician, insurance information, allergies, medical history, informed consent, etc. The whole works. Filled it all in, made the appointment. My wife took my daughter to the vaccine appointment on Thursday morning, and the pharmacy tech hands her a clipboard and a pen. And you can anticipate exactly what was on that clipboard and what they were expected to fill out. It was all the same information that they'd already given them. My wife dutifully filled it out, handed it back to the pharmacy technician, who then took the clipboard and entered the information into the computer system, line by line. And that experience is not uncommon. In fact, it's purely emblematic of the experience that patients have in almost any healthcare setting in the US. We put a lot of data entry burden on our patients, and perhaps even worse, we put a lot of data entry burden on the healthcare professionals who work in the front line of our facilities. They're highly paid, they're hard to find, and they're hard to retain right now. We're expecting them still in 2022 to do this menial and repetitive data entry tasks. So that's a problem. And I would argue, if you hop to the next slide, that we're approaching a moment of crisis. So what we're seeing, though, is that healthcare executives, the ones we spoke to, recognize this problem. Near universally, healthcare executives are saying that they're focused on digital transformation. And if we had a time machine, I would argue, go back 10 years, go back 20 years, I would say that a lot of healthcare executives would have been focused on digital transformation at that time as well. It's still a focus. It's still recognized as a challenge. It's still recognized as a problem we haven't solved. This is a hard nut to crack, right? So the question we face ourselves now in 2022 is, why haven't we solved this problem? If we go to the next slide, at this moment, we're looking at this moment of crisis. We can frame it now as a crisis, a data readiness crisis. Near universal, again, 97% of healthcare executives are pushing for more interoperability. So problem, we all know it, we all recognize it, we all experience it. Recognition of the problem, everyone sees that problem, but we're having this challenge of how to solve it. And so this is what we're faced with now. If we hop onto the next slide, we'll shine more of a light on what that really looks like. Data readiness is the #1 barrier stifling interoperability. And this is what they told us. So almost 3/4 say interoperability in clinical and claims data is a key focus for their org. Almost half are saying that the data that they have is fragmented and siloed. You can't connect it together. It's in different systems. They're relying on their patients and their frontline staff to make those connections. And more than half, 58%, say that their health records vendor just isn't up to scratch. They're not performing at a level to support their data strategy. So these three things combined, this ongoing problem of interoperability, of data readiness, in 2022, given the current healthcare environment that we're operating in, this is a crisis, and it's right to call it that. And so, Dr. Jane, I would throw it back to you at this point. Why does the industry find itself in this situation in 2022?
Yeah, it's a great question, Liam. And what I'd like to do, since we have so many great experts on the call, is, after you've now presented these findings, and really what's sort of impeding our ability to digitally transform for healthcare organizations, maybe we start with Lucas. What are the top obstacles that healthcare organizations face to accelerate innovation? Maybe you can talk about your own personal experiences at your firm and your prior experiences.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, when we talk about this and kind of some of those barriers to really innovating and accelerating, our use of technology, there's really kind of four key areas that come to mind. One is from an interoperability perspective, and we're talking about that as being kind of a primary driver. We have data from multiple sources and systems that we really have to pull together to have a complete view of that patient. That's one of the things that is really critical for us, is to make sure that we have all the relevant data points, so we're not just working off partial information. And unfortunately today there still continues to be too many silos of data. So different companies, different organizations that have different aspects of the patient, and there's some of them that still view it as, well, that's their data, rather than it's the patient's data that they need to share to give the best care possible to those patients. Along with that, a lot of times there's various formats, lack of standardization. So it's this constant struggle and battle to not only get the data, but then be able to ingest it and do something with it. Now, there's standards like FHIR that are helping to address that, but there's still a lot of work to do there. So I'd say the interoperability piece of this is definitely a huge obstacle. Along with that, and it kind of dovetails right into it, are data quality issues. So, depending on how the data was collected, the level of quality can really be variable. I mean, some of them are really good and have a high level of quality in the data. Some of them are very suspect, and you have missing data points, you have missing elements. You've got to piece some of this together to make sure that it's accurate enough to actually use to base care on for these patients. So access to that high quality data is really critical to this. Something else that really kind of, as an umbrella over all this, is regulatory and compliance concerns. We need access to that data. We need high quality data. We want that interoperability, but patients are entrusting us with their, the most private personal information that exists about them. So, making sure that not only we're getting access to the data, but that we're securing it appropriately, that all of our team understands how critical that is, that we have all the regulatory and compliance controls in place, and never looking at it to say, well, what's the easy way we can get this? Just send the file over. What's the big deal? Making sure that everybody understands data security and an awareness around that is absolutely critical. So those, and those regulatory concerns, that's vast. I mean, we have entire teams within our organization that's all they're focusing on, is to make sure that we are, following those regulations and that people understand that. And then I'd say finally, really looking, from the skills gap and ability to acquire talent. So as everybody knows, talent in the technology industry is at an absolute premium. I mean, I've, really spent my whole life and my whole career in IT and technology, and it's been a great place to spend a lot of time and built a lot of great solutions. But I was seeing this, even 10, 15 years ago with a consulting company that I owned. Finding and attracting top talent is very difficult. It's really an employee's market out there today, and has been for a while. So they have their choice on industries they can work with. And I would say in healthcare in particular, unfortunately, a lot of times it's been viewed as, well, it's kind of lagging behind. It takes a long time to bring the innovation to the table. So being able to go out and now finally start showing, these individuals that healthcare is really moving towards the cutting edge, and there are a lot of great technologies you can work with, and helping them understand that we're not going to be doing things the old way, the legacy ways. We're really focused on building these high-performing, agile delivery teams to build great solutions for our patients and to provide that high level of care. So, but we have to solve that talent gap, because to build these great solutions and really be able to innovate, we've got to have the right people, building these solutions. So those, I guess, from my perspective, would be kind of, so the four kind of top areas that come to mind when we talk about some of those obstacles.
Well, thank you, Lucas. Those are definitely important ones. And I know that the comments around talent, the comments around regulatory compliance, I think are really, really important. Mike, you work with a lot of provider systems and healthcare organizations, and you've had some experience in other industries. What do you think about some of the comments that Lucas has made? And do you have any additional obstacles to share with us in terms of, looking at this very sobering data that Liam has presented? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think Lucas nailed it. I mean, when you think about those attributes of those four things that are just, that we got to get over that hump, is essentially what it is. It's like he mentioned, it's interoperability, it's data quality, it's security and regulation, and then skills. Well, I think fundamentally what I've seen in these healthcare systems, these are incredibly mundane type topics. If you talk about managing data, manipulating data, securing it, and then make it of highest quality as possible, those do not make for an attractive ROI when you try to pitch a CFO of an organization. So I think the healthcare system is, of course, we want to be, consumer based and being able to transform digitally and satisfy our consumers. Of course, we want our clinicians to have a better experience using their IT systems and their systems. But I think what the recognition is there's some basic block and tackling that has to get done in areas that don't typically show a big ROI. And so what I have seen, and well, I'll just say what I've seen, I won't name names, I was going to name some names, but I think what I have seen is that the more mature organizations where they've been able to have that kind of foresight that says, before we start, building some advanced new algorithm or relationship with a patient, we need to make sure that all those things Lucas mentioned, that you can't be sending bad data to the wrong person, which covers 1, 2, and 3 on his list. And so it does require that investment, and then not to shortchange the investment around, you have to have people who understand this, because the idea of clinical data semantics and the uniqueness, and I can say this because I've been in many industries, there is not a data domain that's more complex than our clinical claims data that we have. And so finding those people is an investment as well. So to me, what I've seen, to directly answer your question, Anil, is I've seen the companies that have kind of built that case for doing the plumbing and getting the block and tackling right before they try to go, create a new experience. I see them as the ones as kind of understanding this best. They're going to, set the stage for kind of a long-term success.
No, that's a great point. Now, Mike, I've heard you talk about this before, but you talk about the cloud as an accelerant for some of this. Can you elaborate a little bit more? What opportunities does moving to the cloud, and what does that really mean when it comes to data transformation? Can you help our audience really understand that?
Sure, and I'll just do a bit of a history lesson in here. We talk about these silos as being a horrible, evil thing, but having been part of that silo development over the last 20, 30 years, that was the only option we really had in the day. I mean, because compute and storage were limited, we were buying our own servers, we were hosting them in our own data centers. The expenses were massive. We took a use case and we built an application or an analytic environment that supported that precise use case, because we didn't have, and this goes now to answering your question, because we didn't have the ubiquity in compute and storage like we do today. Like a lot of these AI algorithms that people are touting today, they were developed in the early 90s. We just did not have a platform to do that. So what has been fabulous for us, and we've kind of coined the term, it's not a marketing term, but we say we know how to turbo cloud these enterprise data warehouses. And what that is how do you take those data warehouses that have existed today, convert them to the cloud, so now you have what you would almost call infinite compute capability. You certainly have massive storage capabilities, but what's interesting and cool about this is when you get all this data together, you can consolidate all those data warehouses you have and get massive economies of scale from a operating cost perspective. And then not to mention is all these cloud vendors, and they're all fabulous. They're bringing in data management type services now. I think the next frontier is in the area of data management and cataloging, but we have the ability that we don't have to keep duplicating data and getting it smaller and smaller so it's usable to fit a compute platform. So I think the cloud has enabled this. I don't think we as a technology industry in the healthcare space can no longer complain that, well, I need more compute power to be able to solve this problem the right way. I think those days are behind us. And my last point on this, and it's secure. I mean, when I was at the CIA, we moved to the cloud, for crying out loud. So to me, the security and the compute and storage scale problems are solved, and they're ready for us to go after it.
That's awesome. Mike, I'd like to think that what you just described might have helped Liam's wife and child avoid a whole clipboard. But Lucas, I mean, what's the reality of it as you move to the cloud? And certainly there's opportunities, but you sort of, in your firm, have taken a firm stand on this. Tell us a little bit more. What do you think are the opportunities? And maybe even tell us a little bit about some of the challenges.
Sure, no, absolutely. So, from an opportunity perspective, really when you look at the capabilities, I mean, I have been in the industry long enough. I remember when technology used to be on this, 3 to 5 year cycle where you could get really deep in certain technologies, because when it was on-prem servers and deploying software and updates, that took time and was very, very challenging in certain cases. Whereas now with cloud, I mean, I believe I heard the statistic with AWS, they're deploying new features every 11 seconds, something to that degree. So I mean, you have just constant innovation. So the capabilities that are there are just tremendous. And so you look at the major public cloud providers, that competition that's there between them is great for consumers like us, because they're always trying to see who can make the next greatest thing available. And really, it allows us to take advantage of that without that capital cost, that very high capital cost that used to exist when you would have to buy on-prem hardware and licensing. Really you had to overbuy many times, which was always one of the challenges, just because you didn't know how much capacity you would need. So I would say the speed of innovation has grown tremendously. Now, one of the challenges with that, and I'll say it just from, I was involved in cloud back in 2011, at least on the Microsoft side, when it started becoming more prevalent. I mean, you're never caught up. It's constantly changing. So I mean, that is a challenge. Now that goes back to the skills gap. It's finding people that want to learn and continue to learn. But it's a double-edged sword of capabilities. It's fantastic because we have access to all these great technologies, but they're constantly evolving and changing. From a scalability perspective, like Mike said, I mean, there is no excuse to say, well, we don't have enough compute power anymore. And the beauty of it is you can scale that up and down and right size it based on what's needed. I even saw this in my consulting career. It was fantastic to see how new businesses could actually start and grow and evolve, which would have been prohibitive before cloud, because they couldn't have afforded to buy the hardware and software that was needed. So that seemingly limitless scalability, and there is a limit to it, but it's a huge limit. I mean, that's something that's tremendous. And then we can also localize resources. So depending on where we're working throughout the country, we can localize those resources in certain areas and still have a lot of control around those processes and that data. And then finally, and I know Mike mentioned this as well, security. It's interesting. Gartner did a study a couple of years ago where they were basically saying at a certain point in time, companies that are still totally on-prem will be considered less secure than cloud-based companies. Places like Microsoft typically are spending $1 billion a year just on cloud security. I think they announced either last year or this year they're going to be spending $5 billion a year over the next 4 years. No individual private company could go spend that much just on security alone. So I mean, that is tremendous capabilities from a security posture point of view. Now, again, going back to the challenges of that, with cloud, I mean, you have the ability to deploy things out there very quickly, very easily, but you have to make sure that you're doing it the right way. I mean, we've run into customers, in my former life, in a consulting perspective, where they had people just deploy things and didn't even realize that they had introduced security issues. So again, double-edged sword there. There's a lot of security that's enabled when it comes to cloud, but it's shared responsibility. Just because Microsoft or Amazon is hosting those services or that hardware, it doesn't mean that as a customer, you can just kind of abdicate your responsibility and say, well, they're securing it. It truly is that shared responsibility model. So those are, I would say, some of the key, benefits, challenges that I've seen from a cloud point of view.
Well, thank you, Lucas. So, it seems to me, Liam, that both Lucas and Mike have made a pretty compelling argument about what people should be doing, at least these executives, where they should be investing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where they are thinking about investing based on the Morning Consult survey?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually fascinating hearing that discussion and then applying that to what we're hearing from the healthcare executives. These are the areas going left to right where they've invested in historically. Going top to bottom or bottom to top is where they plan to invest in the future. And some really fascinating trends emerge from this. If you look at where they've already invested in, so the things over on the right-hand side, and particularly in the top right, these are the things that are kind of core to the IT investment strategy. Health records near ubiquity in the 90-something% of current investment, of existing investment, and still a high priority for future investment as well. Patient portals right at the top of planned investment areas. What we see coming through over on the left at the top, that what Mike and Lucas have just talked about, the migration from on-prem to cloud, fairly low levels of investment in that existing, but it's seen as more of a high priority going forward. So they're recognizing that opportunity of unlimited compute and storage and migrating more of their workloads, or planning to migrate more of their workloads to the cloud. CRM as well. Recognized opportunity there, continued and further investment. But what's really fascinating is what's sitting down in the bottom left, particularly the ones we've highlighted there, that bottom left, very, very low level of historical investment in data activation. And so they have around 5% have invested in it in the past. And you think about this, of the issues we've talked about in interoperability, the things that Mike and Lucas and Dr. Jane have shone a light on, data activation platform, the data lake, this is right at the foundation of that data strategy and how it's going to come together. If you don't get this element right, all the things you layer on top of it, all the workloads you migrate to the cloud, all the investment you make in a patient portal, all the continued investment in electronic health records, CRM, etc., won't bear fruit because the underlying structure won't be there. So this is an area where we've seen historically low investment, underinvestment, but we are seeing, actually, if you look at that ratio of where we're sitting top to bottom, we're seeing intent to invest in it in the future. And so if we flip to the next slide, this is kind of what we're seeing. 5% have invested in it historically. We see that number again, 42% say their data is fragmented and trapped in silos. This is a really fundamental underlying issue with the data. This is what data lake investment can solve for. And then that third number, 440%. Think back to that previous slide. This is that ratio of what they've done historically to what they're planning to do in the future. The planned investment in data activation platform is the greatest increase over the baseline of any of those potential IT investment areas. So it's that when we look at it through that lens, it is recognized as a real opportunity area to create change within these organizations. And it's the area where we're seeing the greatest change over the historical baseline.
Thanks, Liam. And what I'm struck by on this slide is the 58% of healthcare executives who say their data is not fragmented and is not trapped in silos. You know, what exactly can we learn from them, or do they actually have the full visibility of their enterprise? But let me ask Lucas. So you see these types of numbers, and you look at the conversation you and Mike just had around some of the opportunities. How do you think the data transformation that can be driven through the conversation you just all had, how can they drive the financial performance of a health system? How does one connect the dots here?
Sure.
So that maybe that 5% will be 20% or 50% in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, one of the first things that comes to mind as far as how can the data and really the system implementations help drive financial performance, it's making sure that we are getting to the right patients with the highest need as quickly as possible. And for us, that's going to make sure that not only are we really looking to improve the lives of those patients, but it will end up in better financial outcomes for us. I mean, it really will, because our goal is not to try to reduce the amount of care we're providing. It's providing the right care. And by providing the right care, and really it's what the whole name of our company is based on, getting upstream of when the problems really happen, because a lot of times what you'll see is, people will end up in the ER in the hospital, and it's because something wasn't caught early enough to prevent that admission. So by looking at the right patients at the right time and making sure we're providing the right care to them, that really helps, from an overall patient satisfaction. But then, from a financial perspective, you're spending less to keep patients healthier, which I think ultimately, if we look at that across the entire country, I mean, ultimately that's what we should be doing. So I think that's a big part of it, and that's only possible by having good quality data and having that aggregated data put together. The other place where I see it is really improving operational efficiency. So automating a lot of tasks that were manual before, reducing the amount of labor that's needed, to do some of these mundane tasks, and to keep the data up to date, or to go out and find the different types of information on patients that we need. So, instead of paying a lot of people to do, manual work, if we know the data is quality and we know that it's all pulled together, we can automate that. I mean, I know we've all seen it over the years. Automation really only works if you have a solid foundation to build off of. And then finally, I would say the other area, and it's kind of, lost sometimes in everything that's going on, it's improving employee retention by reducing burnout. So a lot of those mundane tasks, or a lot of the frustration that comes from, wow, we have to go pull this file again, or, oh, this data was wrong again. How come every single time we ingest this, we have to do the same work over and over? It's very expensive to, hire and onboard and train employees, whether they're on the clinical side or on the technology side. So by having that good solid foundation and knowing that we can build systems on top of that, one of those key areas for us is making sure that the team that we've invested so much in is with us for the long haul, and that we're doing everything we can to make sure that they're really able to focus, on the clinical side, taking care of patients and not doing a bunch of administrative work. And on the technology side, focused on building these great solutions to help, the care teams and our patients, not doing a bunch of data wrangling and data scrubbing, on a day-to-day basis that really is not that fulfilling from an employee perspective.
Well, those are really good thoughts. And I think back, we've spent what, 36 billion in taxpayer funds to put electronic health records in place. And Lucas, you're describing something going beyond the EHR. But Mike, I mean, some of these CFOs have spent millions, and probably in your shoes, in your prior life, you've had to make these decisions. How do you convince folks that there is a financial return for some of this investment when they sort of have done it? And how is this going to be a different story for them? Lucas gave us some glimpse of that, getting beyond the EHR and sort of reducing some of that drudgery or that low value work and reducing the burden. But when you have conversations with CFOs and CDOs, how do you sort of explain to them how they're going to improve their financial performance by making these investments?
Yeah. So there's a couple angles on that, just leveraging where Lucas, kind of ended on, employee satisfaction, the clinician satisfaction, certainly better experiences with your patient are all great. But unfortunately, and what, I was in the hospitality business, consumer scoring and employee scoring factored into dollars and cents. I really haven't seen, and there probably are some in the healthcare space where they can actually convert, patient satisfaction, clinician satisfaction, employee satisfaction to an actual number. And so that's even in the hospitality business, which is a service industry based on customer satisfaction, it was complicated, but those algorithms existed to show value in improving somebody's experience. So that's kind of one piece I think we're maturing in the health space in that, but there really ought to be ways that CFOs can see there's value in people being happy with the services that we provide in the healthcare space. But then I would turn then, kind of to the IT operating costs. And you said it, Anil, I've been part of this. I mean, given, the EMRs came on the scene, they came in fast, we spent a ton of money, and we were able to create electronic records out of the transactions. We were struggling and fighting, I think you said 62 billion. Well, there's probably an equivalent amount of money that was spent on trying to analyze the data and get it to the right people to make decisions on that. And again, I'll just say I did not do a good job of architecting that environment, because I created and I would argue we all did in the industry, we created purpose-built applications and data warehouses that were wholly redundant. I mean, the end case was unique. Perhaps it was managing referrals or managing certain outcomes and situations. But the data, when I went through and kind of, as we started to clean up some of the redundancy at Kaiser Permanente, we found that the files were replicated on average 11 times. And it's probably more, but somebody gets a hold of a file, the exact same file goes somewhere else. So not only that, just straight up storage costs and inefficiencies, which could be minimized. There also was an entire data processing stream that was going on, which involved people, expensive equipment, to the point Lucas made earlier. We were buying hardware at those times. And so as you progress in what I would consider a clinical data management environment, is you're going to see reductions in those. You'll see reduction of that hardware, that special purpose hardware, reductions in storage, reduction in people. And then I'd also argue that the hit that we put on the EMRs, because we were pulling data out 25 different ways that was highly redundant, the EMR had to spend more money to make its environment more, to be able to bolster the type of stress we put on it in doing those nightly extracts. And I'm almost certain anybody on this webinar has been in the situation where it's 5 in the morning and people are going, our nightly jobs didn't finish. Do I kill them or what do I do? Or do I let it go into the business day, because the transactional performance of those EMRs were affected because of the bulk loads that are going at night. And this is just not the modern way of operating this enterprise. And so we've seen cases, you mentioned some of the health clients I work with, we've seen cases where in the analytic environment, we've seen reductions of up to 70% in their operating costs by eliminating independent silos, data warehouses, and going to a data lake where it's common shared information.
I think that brings us to a great segue into thinking about an enterprise data strategy that can drive multiple use cases with the appropriate data governance and the appropriate oversight from the various business owners. Instead of each one having their own silos and their own analytics staff and their own data scientists and their own security models, you can have a unified way of looking at things. Again, with an appropriate amount of data governance. You don't want certain data to be seen by certain folks, but one would argue that a single source of truth that can drive some of these use cases like cloud transformation, clinical transformation. How do you make that clinical experience for the clinicians as well as for the patients most meaningful? And how do we make the operational aspects of what we do as efficient as possible, tie it all together so health systems can take on more risk when they're working with payers? And then finally, as they say, no money, no mission, how can we optimize the revenue cycle experience so that everyone is working from the same playbook with the same single source of truth? And instead of Mike's example of where there's 7 to 11 copies of the same data, perhaps there's maybe only a few copies that are where parts of the data is redacted for certain users. And where a bench of data scientists, to Liam's point and Lucas's point, talent is a problem in terms of finding the right amount of talent for the kinds of projects we do. If we can spread the talent pool across different use cases, we would all be better off. So let's keep this slide on the screen for a moment, and let's talk about the health systems, especially now with I won't use the R word, but it's looming. And we know that although healthcare seems to be immune from certain economic forces, it may not necessarily be the case across the board. How do we deal with this issue when we have such budget pressures? How do you start without having a significant amount of upfront expense? How do you scale that up? And then how do you set up a governance and quality process in order to maximize the value? And let's start with Mike first, and then we'll go to Lucas to share thoughts. And Liam, if you've got any insights from your experience on the morning consult, please feel free to chime in. Mike.
Thanks, Anil. So so it's almost, of course, being a technologist and really knowing what some of these infrastructures look like in the health systems, it's almost, this is the time to do it, as if there are particular slowdowns. I mean, again, I think there are massive efficiencies to be found in the architectures that we've put together over the past decade, responding to the EMRs coming in. And what's cool and what's interesting about the clouds, and Lucas mentioned it, it's not a huge capital investment upfront. Almost all the solutions that are coming out in the cloud today or in these environments are subscription-based models. You can turn them off when you're not using them. I mean, if you just think of a simple case of if you spent $4 or $5 million on this huge computer rack, it doesn't get used all the time. I mean, people go home, people sleep, that computer charges don't stop. A cloud does. And so I think there are so many efficiencies in there. I would almost argue that perhaps a slowdown in business might be the right time to regroup and kind of fix your environment to get through this period, because it will reduce your operating costs, whatever percentage of the IT costs are driving within your organization. And then the second point, which I'm sure Lucas will go in better detail than I can, is that in times of increased competitive pressures, is that people are going to go to that environment. People today and their expectations around the consumer experience, that's going to set you apart in these particular environments. So it's almost, this is the way, increased competitiveness and to seek out reduction in expenses. It's almost, this is the right time, because it's not a huge one-time capital investment like they used to be.
Lucas, what do you think?
Yeah, 100% agree with Mike on that. I mean, taking a cloud first mindset is one of the best things organizations can do. I mean, that's kind of been our mantra from day one. Not only the cost reduction and really kind of growing with an organization organically, so the cost structure kind of follows that growth, but also things like being able to do a lot of very fast experimentation to find the appropriate way to solve a problem and not feel like you have a whole lot of wasted resources that went along with that. So I didn't have to go out and purchase a bunch of hardware, software. I could just experiment, say, is this going to work? Yes, it is. Continue forward. No, it's not. Fine. It's the whole fail fast mindset mentality. And then, you have those new technologies constantly being pushed out there, so you can experiment with those and see how that's going to help your business. The other thing that I'd say that goes right along with this is leveraging industry solutions that are proven and really can provide a lot of the foundation to build systems. Don't go reinvent the wheel. I mean, that's something, a lot of companies will go out and spend millions upon millions of dollars to rebuild something that really isn't unique to them and isn't providing innovation to their customers. They just built it because they could. I mean, believe me, I've seen many companies over the years that have done that. And it's like, but you realize that already exists out there. How is this actually making your company different or better? So, not only do you reduce your time to market by leveraging some of those solutions as foundational pieces, but you get a benefit from the experience of all those other customers that have used that platform. Now, again, when it comes to intellectual property and things that, really are a company's secret sauce, absolutely need to build those. But then when you do go to build them, focusing on, the kind of that cloud first mentality helps reduce that overall cost. And then the last thing that I would say is making sure that as systems are being built out, whether it's from the data perspective or the application perspective, really having that robust architecture that's API driven, kind of following that microservices pattern, so that you're not creating more silos. What you want to be able to do is integrate with these different organizations and these different systems as you're building your platform of products. And so over time, that type of architecture is actually going to save you money, because you're not building these big monoliths. You're not having to go in and spend time, re-architecting and paying down tech debt that you've accumulated over the years. So I would say those are some of the things that, from my perspective, can really help organizations as they're growing this out and building that to kind of minimize the costs required as they go.
Thanks, Lucas. And I think you just made a perfect transition. If we go to the next slide, Mike, I mean, can you describe a little bit about how Innovators is approaching it? Because I think it's very, very aligned to the vision that Lucas just mentioned in terms of building it once and so, please describe this to us.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, and we mentioned some of this early on today. This is a journey. Being able to get our environments to be able to get to the point where Lucas is talking about, where we have flexible services that we can recompose to solve different problems, to take in, there's going to be some perhaps consolidation in the industry. These all don't have to be multi-billion-dollar IT consolidations. That we have the basic services to do this. But our point of view, at least Innovators, and what we're kind of pushing on in the industry, is interoperability is great. The FHIR APIs, best first step ever. Congratulations that CMS is pushing this. I was just at a recent developer conference for the HL7 FHIR folks. There are people fired up on this, and it is absolutely the best first step we can make. But I think what we're trying to say is, and the little pinkish line is kind of showing how many people are kind of playing in this space, who are providing mature solutions in this place. And so there's a lot of FHIR API vendors coming out, and that needs to keep going and evolving. But we also do believe that there's some other steps in this journey that we have to take to get a true clinical data management environment. And what we're coining the term as, true data readiness, is that you have to be able to aggregate this data and do things like resolve identities. People, what we have found at Innovators, people have on average between claim systems, different medical systems and MRNs, lab systems, pharma, 6 to 8 different identities. That has to be consolidated. And so that's kind of this idea of aggregation. There you can read the other words in there, common ontologies. The data has to be defined the same way. Each EMR has taken slightly different approaches for defining that. It needs to be aggregated. Then hydration. We have to be able to populate the other environments in our ecosystem. At Kaiser Permanente, we had 1,800 applications that needed to interoperate, that had to share data between themselves. You have to have the ability to, just coin an older term about data liquidity, but the ability to move that data, whether it's populate an OMOP model for the research people, or populate a model for the customer relationship management vendors, or populate ERP type vendors. The data has to be movable, yet not, to maintain lineage with the core data. And then it has to be activated. If you can't get that data to a clinician or to a patient or to a caregiver, then you had a great academic experience. We need to get the data out there. The APIs are great for that. Many of the workflows are being developed to kind of do that. And last and not least is harmonization. And this capability that, since we do know the data is going to be used in multiple different use cases, we need to be consistent. We have some customers of ours at Innovators that are using our platform wholly to get consistent analytics across the different analytic environments within their organization. That's a real kind of a nerdy type solution, but it's a real problem where basic questions to the business users and business leadership needs to be consistent and driven from the same data and same analytic type environment. So that's the whole idea of harmonization. And we believe we're one of the few out there that are taking on the whole 5 elements here. But we do think this is a path the industry has to go on to be truly enabled, and have what we'd consider data readiness.
Well, thank you, Mike, for walking us through this. And we are at the end of our time. Liam, thank you so much for walking us through the morning consult research. And I think it really led itself to a fascinating conversation. Lucas, Mike, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I want to thank our audience for tuning in and listening to us speak. And thank you so much. And here's some contact information about us if you would like to get more information. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Anil, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to also thank everyone here as well, and mention that at this time, as mentioned, we do have to wrap up, but we do want to express our gratitude for such a wonderful presentation that was brought to you today by Innovators. So again, don't forget to take our brief evaluation at the conclusion of today's event and share your thoughts with us. As a reminder, you will receive an email within 24 hours to rewatch the on-demand recording of today's session, and it will be available in the HIMSS Resource Hub for a limited time. So feel free to come back and watch it anytime. Thanks.